On Tuesday, Shohrat Zakir, the chairman of the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China, told the press in Beijing that the vocational training centers as, quote, hugely positive for how they've boosted employment for the Uyghur people. He reiterated that such centers aim to re-educate those Xinjiang residents influenced by the so-called three evil forces: terrorism, extremism and separatism. After their study, said Zakir, the great majority of trainees can, quote, find suitable jobs that they really like and earn a satisfactory living. What was said exactly during the press conference? What more could we find out about the anti-terror measures taken in Xinjiang? Joining me here in the Beijing studio are Wang Jiang, who is native of Xinjiang and a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute of Law of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and Wenwen, a journalist for the Global Times newspaper. Welcome to both of you. To the point. Now, Tuesday's press conference by Mr. Zakir actually attracted a lot of attention of both domestic and international media. Exactly, how do you explain the kind of attention that people are paying to this issue at this particular moment? Why do you think this press conference was conceived to be so unusual, Mr. Wang?
Well, I think some of the Western media use unusual, this word. It's quite a little bit strange for me, because since last year, the Chinese, Xinjiang issues, of course, draw a lot of attention globally. But Xinjiang government and also the China central government try a lot to announce, to release different kinds of information about the Xinjiang. So I don't know for the Western media, they just unseen what has been released or not. So they use the word like unusual is quite strange for me. I think it's plenty of the information is there.
Okay, but it's also quite rare that the leader of the Xinjiang Autonomous Region came out to speak to the press. On what occasion was this press conference being held? Was it specifically to address the situation concerning these training centers, or was it about the overall development of Xinjiang as we prepare for the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic?
Yes, of course. I think they just try to give some positive information about the Xinjiang, and people finish the training in the training center, and so nowadays they can rejoin the society and to find a job, and as being announced, the attempt to deal with terrorism is quite successfully by now. So I think it's quite an important message to send.
Okay. So when asked about Xinjiang's vocational education and training centers, Zakir described the centers as being hugely positive for the region, and he said that, I don't know how this becomes such an international focus. It's probably due to unbalanced information. When you work for Global Times and you deal with stories concerning China from the Chinese perspective, but you also read extensively the international media, especially how they report on China, on Xinjiang. Do you understand the kind of unbalanced information that Mr. Zakir was talking about? And what's your impression of the situation?
Yeah, I think when Western media look at Xinjiang, they always look at the religious issue and the ethnic minority issue, but it ignores how many efforts the government and the whole of Xinjiang people have made to improve the livelihoods of themselves. So and also I think there is historical roots, because the West thinks that Xinjiang should not be part of China, but actually since the Han Dynasty, Xinjiang has already been a part of China ever since. So the governance of Xinjiang is part of the governance of the whole of China. Yeah.
And a few points I'd like to share.
Yes.
I think about the unbalance of the information is, if you consider about Xinjiang, it's multi-language and multi-cultural, multi-ethnic region, multi-religion region, and so it's really hard for journalists and also for academics to understand it. Actually, it's really hard for any people who want to have a deeper understanding about Xinjiang. And secondly, I think for the Western media is just somehow ignoring the background of what's really going on. There's very little report on the terrorism attack on Xinjiang, in Xinjiang, actually.
Yeah. And brief us a little bit about the background. I mean, you were born in Xinjiang,
yeah.
right? You grew up in Xinjiang, I understand.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit exactly what's the context of what we are seeing now. Why such unique measures had to be taken to counter the terrorist threats in Xinjiang?
Okay, so since the very beginning, I think there is a spread for try to make Xinjiang independent. In Xinjiang, those kind of ideology was in Xinjiang for quite a long time. And since the 1990s to now, some of the terrorism activities was in Xinjiang. Xinjiang suffers from that a lot. And from the China white paper, being thousands of people, thousands of incidents happened, and thousands casualty, hundreds police officers was being killed in those actions. And I think another very important issue we're missing here is Western media of the whole West, even including academic area, people just don't really say the interrelationship between the terrorism action in Xinjiang and the international terrorism. It's really hard to explain why some of the terrorists in Xinjiang, they transport themselves to Afghanistan or to Syria, join the Al-Qaeda, even the Islamic State. If they only really want the independence of Xinjiang, then we can't explain that. So what we're doing in Xinjiang is actually a part of the global counterterrorism work to do.
There was this letter written by some 20, or signed up by some 24 countries, mostly Western, criticizing China's policy in Xinjiang. In response, some 50 countries also signed up a letter in support of China's policy in Xinjiang, and the letter was submitted to the UN Human Rights Council and also the High Commissioner for Human Rights in the United Nations. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Hua Chunying responded on Monday that all those 24 countries criticizing China's Xinjiang policy are Western developed countries. Their total population is no more than 600 million, and none of those are Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries, or developing countries. Why are these details important that she has to point out, Wang Wenwen?
Because the U.S. and the West may be the largest source of the sense of insecurity of the entire Islamic world, manifested by U.S. President Donald Trump's Muslim ban. So actually, there's a lot of religious unfairness in the West, but the West does not focus on their own affairs, but point an accusing finger at China. But China's religious governance and also its anti-terrorism efforts can be used as a lesson for most Muslim countries and those the more than 20 countries supported China.
Actually, yeah, there's 50 countries that support China. Actually, it's very interesting. They come from several continents. There are developing countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe, and the total population of these countries are almost 2 billion, more than twice of those 24 countries who criticize China in this policy. And it's also worth noting that 28 out of these 50 countries which support China's policy come from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation countries. Why are these countries, which have a lot of Muslim population, come out and support China's measures to counter terrorism in Xinjiang?
Yeah.
Wang Jiang.
I think those Islamic countries try to send a signal. Is that about the religion? The Islam is a peaceful religion. And even in the Quran, it says if you kill one human being, it's like it kills a whole humankind. So I think it's peaceful religion, and those countries try to send the right signal to whatever is terrorism or extremism, as they are against them. And secondly, I think they do realize there is a huge gap between the developing country and the developed country. There is a double standard was applying here. Even after 9/11, we have a sort of like international counterterrorism measure has been built, but the double standard is still there. So those countries use their voice, try to support China. What they are doing is quite right.
It's very also noteworthy to point out that actually, since these measures were taken, for almost 3 years, there has been no serious violence or terrorist incidents in Xinjiang happening. Although you cannot justify a means with the effect of it, and yet it does say that peace and safety means a lot to Xinjiang, and people definitely need that. Wang Wenwen, how do you look at the effectiveness of these measures, and going forward, what are we going to see in terms of anti-terrorism measures?
I think China has made a lot of efforts to root out terrorism in Xinjiang, which has been misunderstood by the West. I think when China targets the terrorists in Xinjiang, there are a part of the terrorists are from the Uyghur people, but it doesn't mean that China is suppressing the entire Uyghur ethnic group. And when some of those people are Muslims, it doesn't mean China is persecutes the entire Muslim community. Yeah, I think China should elaborate
this distinction. This
yes.
distinction has
yes.
to be made. Okay, really quickly, Wang Jiang, we have actually seen the people's livelihood improving in Xinjiang while terrorism is being curbed. What kind of effort is being made there that is not mentioned by the press in the West?
Well, it's quite a lot. I think in Xinjiang, from the government officials stay in the village with the people, helping with people get off the poverty, and learning about the national language, which is Chinese, so they can have like a more opportunity to develop themselves and also get better income. Those things is about like really winning the hearts and minds of the local people. I think that's become like the best weapon we have here against the terrorism and extremism.
Yeah, and actually the numbers are quite impressive. I just found out myself that over the past 7 decades, the GDP in Xinjiang has grew by 150 times, and the per capita GDP grew by 38 times on a per capita basis, knowing that the population of Xinjiang has grown over the past few decades. So a lot to be told behind these stories. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to Wang Jiang and Wang Wenwen. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. I'll see you when I come back after my vacation time. Thank you for having followed us.